In fact, having the idea
that there is a place you have to get to be free and stay there will restrict freedom from being liberated in many, many ways, in all of its possibility. You'll have the very idea itself will set up a restriction to other possibilities. So we can actually have the experience of feeling free and having the affect of freedom and actually be abiding in that and attempting to remain there. And we can feel free, but in fact, it isn't complete freedom yet, because it's restricted to one condition. And that's something that's extremely important and is one of the principles of the diamond approach, of liberating the dynamism to function as it will. And then the more free we are, the more the words I and mine and our change to simply point to that's what's happening in this location, without an attachment to it or a grabbing to it. So the liberation is not the liberated person that we've taken ourselves to be. The one who's seeking for it is actually the one who has to dissolve before it happens. So my, mine, and I change character.
Yeah, so later on when we say I, we mean being is, it's a matter of speech, you have to use the word I, but when I say I don't mean an individual person. Although we are both the formless, mysterious being and the individual, we're both at the same time, the two sides of the same coin. The being an individual does not disappear because you continue to live life. If the individual disappears, there will be no experience at all. But since there's experience, being manifests through the individual to live its freedom. We call it, usually, the term for it is freedom, because it is that way, it is divine freedom. Meaning it is the freedom of gods and goddesses. When realization proceeds that way, it's liberated. It's like each human being is a god or a goddess. And gods and goddesses, they're not trying to attain freedom. They're busy expressing it, you see. And that way, discovering new ranges of freedom, new possibilities of experience, and which will appear in the ongoing practice, the ongoing living of being, as a continual, endless discovery. Life is a life of discovery and learning and discovering that includes spontaneously and naturally being of benefit to others, being of benefit to other beings. Because being is naturally generous and kind and giving of itself. So service or help and benefit to other is not an extra thing to the freedom. Freedom means being, manifesting what is needed. Somebody else is having difficulty in being naturally inclined to what will help. But it will help in a fundamental way, not necessarily the way the person believes they should be helped. So freedom is not self-centered that way. It is really for everybody. And free people really have others, have the world in mind a lot more than themselves, because they can't find themselves.
What do you mean by having the world in mind?
Meaning that the world and the people in it is to, the expressing of the freedom is benefiting. The world, the environment, the people, all the beings, this world and all other worlds.
So it might not be on your mind, but it's something you're responding to. It's difficult not to be aware of the difficulties and the suffering, but also it's a way of freely being able to engage and respond to the love and the joy also, to participate in it, to be able to recognize that as well, and the beauty in the world. But people think of realization as heavy. It does have a gravitas to it, and there can be a great deal of presence and density to it, but there can also be a very light-hearted, playful feeling to it. When you feel free and you have that kind of freedom, life feels spacious, even though there's much work to do. Even though there is a lot to respond to, it can feel like you're still outside of time and space, where responsibilities don't weigh heavy, where there's a lightness to it. And it doesn't mean it's all fun, but there's a spaciousness around the functioning and the responsibility. So and there can be great fun, because the heart is light and unburdened.
Yeah, because there's no person who is responsible here, who carries no individual self, separate individual self that feels it has a responsibility. It's being itself manifesting in a beneficial way to the experiencer and everybody else. And being naturally is inclined to recognize the self and the construction of the self, to illuminate them and liberate them. And those selves don't have to be just one self, any self. So whenever a being recognizes self, recognizes suffering, so it's inclined to liberate it, whichever way is appropriate to the situation. Its presence is liberating, and of course its action, when it takes action, is also liberating. But so we talk about freedom that doesn't depend on condition, which means there's a simplicity to it, an ordinariness. It's not like we have to be in this amazing kind of wonderful ecstatic state to be free. Freedom can be anything. Freedom can be experiencing the depth of the universe, or you're, sipping your coffee. Both of them are exactly the same. That is more the flavor of freedom. Like there isn't one thing that is better than another. Whatever being manifests itself, it is still being, and there's a freedom because we don't need it to be one way or another. And whichever way it is fine.
That's the life of being, when it unfolds in that way, where there's kindness, compassion, ecstasy, neutrality. All of these are just part of the way life is flowing through. And that's the non-conditional experience of whatever's there to come through. That's really life, living itself. And that's fun. You never know what's going to happen next. And you're not trying to get there. It's like just a spontaneous action.
Yeah, we never knew where we were going, did we?
No,
it was
but we
always
like
a discovery.
To get together and discover things.
Yeah. So now, you see, many of the students know a lot about the path because the books are written, but when we were going through it, we had no idea what's going to come next.
Then there's a checklist.
So each one of them was a discovery. That means the practice from the beginning doesn't have a goal. That's the most important thing about the inquiry. You cannot practice inquiry effectively if you have something in mind where you want to get, or you solve a certain problem or get a certain answer. We just inquire of what is there, and we leave it to being to do what it does. We don't know, and usually, frequently, will surprise us, and the surprises are wonderful, fun.
But what's interesting is even though we didn't know what was going to happen, we'd have a realization, recognize something that was true about ourselves, have these amazing experiences of these dimensions of reality and say, that's it, found it, that's it, this is good. And we'd stay there for a very long time and keep inquiring, and different things would be happening, and then all of a sudden something would open up and we'd say, well, you know, this doesn't exactly answer the question about this other thing. And something else would start to liberate itself. Even though we were convinced we found it, and that's it. I don't need to do anything anymore. We can just sort of hang back. We couldn't stop asking the questions and exploring experience, and then something else would open up. But we never knew what it was going to be. We still don't know. That's the point we're trying to make. If you really want to get down to it. I don't have any idea what's going to happen next.
So there's no last chapter and no final word. That's the idea. So if you're waiting for the final word, there isn't one. There are going to continue to be new final words. Yeah. That's why we use the word freedom. I think it's important, because if you're waiting for the final word, if you're waiting to reach an end, that you feel your freedom is conditional on that. You see, and the freedom we're talking about is non-conditional, not conditioned by any state, any attainment, any achievement, any realization, any.
Actually, I just got a connection to something.
Yeah.
What we call runaway realization is an expression of freedom. When you don't, I mean, it's like when that evolving dynamic realization just keeps continuing on and showing new things, that is the freedom. And we saw that happening, but we didn't know it was going to lead to understanding what freedom was. We just saw that it was continuing and continuing to unfold and had no control over it. And then we began to understand really that that is an expression of freedom, of that liberating dynamism of being is just continuing to show new things. Might be obvious, but